Our story begins with a man who spent 3 years in the army, only to be hailed online as the god of fishing, though he uses his life as bait rather than lures. We see that instead of fish, he pulls up suitcases filled with human remains, unexploded bombs, or even entire submarines with a single cast. Once, he even snagged a hidden illegal net, sending the cheating pond owner straight to prison. To be honest, he catches everything except actual fish. In fact, he has filled the local detention center so many times that the police officers are on the verge of a collective breakdown. "Brother Emo, I beg you, please stop fishing," they plead, as we find him now by the Qingsha River on the outskirts of town. The afternoon sun is as harsh as a wicked stepmother, leaving Emo drenched in sweat, while his float remains stubbornly still on the water. Just as he is about to suffer from heat stroke, the float suddenly ripples. With a surge of joy, he grips the rod and heaves upward. But the rod doesn't budge, and a massive, strange force pulls back so hard that he is nearly dragged into the river himself. Good grief, he thinks, sensing a disaster, a truly massive disaster, is currently lurking beneath the surface. The surrounding fishermen, who had been dozing off, are quickly drawn over by the commotion to see what the excitement is about. "Not bad, young man. Look at that bend in the rod. That's got to be at least 70 or 80 pounds, one of them exclaims. They shout advice for him to stay steady and not let the line snap, urging him to play the fish carefully. Encouraged by their praise, Emo puts his full strength into it as the massive object beneath the water slowly begins to surface. Under the expectant gaze of the crowd, everyone wonders if it might be a 100-pound black carp or a giant topmouth coulter. A dark shadow gradually reveals itself, but as it emerges, we see it lacks the sleek, streamlined body of a fish. Instead, it is a bulging green woven sack, covered in tangled water weeds and river silt from soaking in the depths for far too long. It looks like a giant, hairy ball, and the onlookers begin to shake their heads in disappointment at the sight. "What a shame," they sigh. "How did he end up reeling in a bag of literal trash?" Mo's heart sinks from the clouds to the valley floor as he drags the sack ashore, only for an indescribable stench to hit him instantly. A sickeningly sweet and nauseating odor fills the air, causing a nearby fisherman to immediately start gagging from the smell. Mo pinches his nose and squats down to retrieve the hook, but his pupils suddenly contract as he spots something through a tear in the bag. A single toe, painted with bright red nail polish, pokes out, sending a shock through his brain that leaves him collapsed on the ground, unable to move. An elderly man nearby, still full of excitement, rushes over to get a better look at the catch. But a second later, the man's words cut off abruptly as a piercing, blood-curdling scream echoes across the riverbank. 20 minutes later, red and blue police lights illuminate the wild river as Mo finds himself squeezed between two officers. He isn't in handcuffs yet, but to be honest, the way they are guarding him makes him look exactly like a prime suspect. The veteran officer, Wang Jiangwo, is a captain with eyes like a hawk. One glance from him is enough to make anyone shiver. Mo tries to explain that he only wanted a bowl of fish soup and had no idea he would pull up something so gruesome. Jiangwo glances at Mo's empty fish bucket and then points toward the woven sack lying on the ground. He tells Mo that fish soup is off the menu today, and instead, it's time to head to the station for a very long chat. Inside the interrogation room, Mo clutches a disposable paper cup, feeling completely dazed while Jiangwo sternly flips through the case files. The forensic report confirms that the contents of the bag are indeed human remains, though the tissue has almost entirely decomposed. Only the limb bones and some surface adipocere remain, suggesting the victim has been dead for at least 2 years. Realizing this has nothing to do with the young man before him, Jiangwo closes the file and lets his tone soften slightly. He tells Mo to stop worrying, as their investigation proves he is simply a fisherman with exceptionally tragic luck. Then, with a hint of irony, he asks if Mo still has an appetite for that fish soup. Mo's face turns instantly pale. He waves his hands frantically, swearing that he is done with fishing. In fact, he's done with it for the rest of his life. After finishing the paperwork, we see Mo carrying his gear out of the station doors, finally free to go. Yet, that sickly sweet stench seems to linger in his nose, prompting him to look at his fishing rod and decide to throw it all away. But just as he opens the lid of a trash can, a sudden ding echoes inside his mind, changing everything. A mechanical voice echoes in his mind, announcing that his bad luck index has peaked and the fishing heat map system is now bound to him. The rules are simple. Successfully pulling something up earns points, and every single point can be exchanged for 100 yuan in cash. When he receives a 500-point starter bonus, Mo freezes mid-motion, realizing that 1 point equals $100. That means those 500 points are worth 50,000 yuan, and suddenly, the fear in his mind vanishes into thin air. In its place is a near-frenzied excitement. If fishing can lead to wealth, then he is more than ready to become a professional. Checking the time, he sees there are 3 hours left before dark, so he silently commands the system to open. A semi-transparent blue map of the Linjiang City waterways instantly materializes before his eyes. He notices a specific area glowing with a bright red light about 500 meters downstream from the crime scene, and he grits his teeth. He grabs a shared bike and pedals straight back to the Qingshui River, because to be honest, bad luck means nothing in the face of 50,000 yuan. He tells himself that even if a ghost crawled out of the water, he'd push it back down just to get paid, and soon he arrives at the riverbank. His old fishing spot is now cordoned off with police tape, where several forensic officers are still busy collecting evidence. Following the system's heat map, he finds a flat spot further downstream to set up his bait and cast his line once more. Sure enough, the rod has been in the water for less than 10 minutes when the float begins to twitch and slowly sink. This is a classic bite, and deep down, he is overjoyed, assuming this must finally be a large, wild crucian carp. He holds his breath, waits for the perfect moment, and jerks the rod upward, only to feel a familiar, heavy resistance. That soul-crushing weight causes the smile to freeze on his face as he cautiously begins to reel in the line. As the object draws closer, we see a strangely shaped item with no bag to hide it, just a few ragged fragments of clothing. They are wrapped around a pale, white bone with a distinct joint structure that looks suspiciously like a human femur. The jagged marks at the break suggest this was no natural occurrence, and in that moment, Mo's hope finally dies a quiet death. A chill runs from his feet to the top of his head as he wonders if he's found a graveyard, and with trembling hands, he reaches for his phone. "Captain Wong, you haven't clocked out yet, have you? I'm afraid you'll need to come back. I've hooked something again." When Captain Wang Jingwo arrives at the scene once more, his gaze is a mix of shock and deep suspicion as he asks Mo to be honest. He wonders if Mo used to be a tomb raider or perhaps studied the ancient arts of finding hidden treasures in the earth. Mo tells him he was simply trying to catch a fish to improve his lunch, a claim that Wang Jingwo meets with a skeptical roll of his eyes. The captain then stares intently at the bone, noting that the previous fragment was identified as belonging to a victim from 2 years ago. It matches a sensational cold case perfectly, and this new leg bone likely belongs to the very same unfortunate soul. Wang had handled that case himself. They had a suspect, but without a body, the investigation had completely stalled. He never imagined the key evidence would be fished out like this, and he tells Mo that he's truly done a great service. Once the case is officially closed, he promises to be the first to apply for a helpful citizen reward on Mo's behalf. 3 days later, in the Linjiang City Administrative Hall, Mo stands on stage as the man of the hour with a large red flower pinned to his chest. In his hands, he holds a ceremonial banner prepared by Wang Jingwo himself, labeling him a citizen against crime. Beside him, Wang Jingwo speaks into the microphone with great passion, announcing that in light of Comrade Mo's efforts and his outstanding contribution to this major case, the Bureau has decided to grant him the title of Good Citizen. The moment he hears the mention of a 50,000 yuan bonus, Mo's dull eyes instantly light up with newfound life. He tells himself the trip wasn't a waste after all, and as he leaves the ceremony, Wang Jingwo catches up to him outside. The captain tells him to take it easy, noting that the case is solved and the dead can rest, which is a great deed indeed. He adds that if Mo happens to fish up anything else interesting in the future, he should skip the emergency line and call his private number. Mo asks the captain if he could wish him something better for once, as he really just wants to be a quiet, ordinary fisherman. Wang laughs and wishes him a big catch instead, and after saying his goodbyes, Mo heads straight back to his home. He glances at his fishing gear in the corner, thinking that if he's going to do this right, he'll need much better tools for the job. He figured that if he kept catching such grim things, his rod clearly wasn't strong enough to ward off the bad luck. So, he spent a small fortune, buying a limited edition Daiwa Wave Dragon hand rod, top-tier imported fishing line, and master-grade floats. He even swapped the handle for peach wood to ward off evil spirits, certain that with this divine weaponry, he would finally catch a real fish. The next morning, his new gear arrived at his doorstep. We see him open his fishing heat map system to check the local waters. The map of Linjiang City had refreshed, and the red dots on the Qingshui River had completely vanished. Instead, about 30 kilometers away at the ominous Ghost Cave Pond, a deep crimson light was pulsing on his screen. It sat quietly at the bottom of the water. He hesitated, wondering what he would do if something actually happened while he was all alone. After a moment's thought, he pulled an old phone from his drawer and downloaded a streaming app, thinking that if he was going down, he might as well have witnesses. Besides, he told himself that netizens are often more reliable than real friends. By 3 in the afternoon, he reached the mountains near the pond. The taxi driver glanced at the destination on the GPS, then at Mo's professional gear, and hesitated before finally speaking up. He warned the young man that Ghost Cave Pond was a dirty place where people mysteriously fell in every year. Mo simply thanked him. The driver added that one could hear crying there at night, then slammed on the gas and sped away as if fleeing for his life. Mo grumbled that the man was just trying to scare him. He adjusted his expensive Wave Dragon rod on his back, trying to bolster his own courage. He told himself that since he had already fished up human remains, he had no reason to fear ghosts. He then began the 10-minute trek down the trail. Finally, we arrive at the exact location marked by the system's red dot. It was a classic, secluded mountain lake. The water was a deep, heart-stopping shade of dark green, looking quite terrifying indeed. Mo swallowed hard, feeling a sudden chill. He found a relatively flat rock to set down his bags and began fiddling with his live streaming equipment. To be honest, it was a very quiet start. Since he was a new streamer, the room was empty, but he wasn't in a hurry. He skillfully prepared his bait and adjusted his float. Using a specialized spoon, he tossed corn kernels into the water one by one, then cast his line perfectly over the glowing red spot. Time ticked by second. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the light in the valley began to fade into a deep, heavy shadow. Surprisingly, the number of viewers in the livestream began to climb, reaching just over 50 people. To be honest, Mo wanted to leave. Sitting there made his back feel unnervingly cold, but the system's red dot was right there. The dot was even swaying slightly, which meant it was definitely a living creature. He told his viewers not to worry. He explained that big fish only start biting at night. Just as he spoke, the float on the water suddenly jerked, and he snapped to attention. He shouted to his audience that he had a bite, his body instinctively reacting to the sudden movement. He yanked the rod upward, and with a sharp crack, the sound of the fishing line cutting through the water was incredibly loud. It even carried a metallic vibration. His expensive wave dragon rod instantly bent into a perfect, strained crescent moon. An indescribable force surged from the tip of the rod, pulling him forward so hard he nearly tumbled headfirst into the pond. The livestream chat exploded with excitement in that very instant. But at this moment, Mo couldn't care less about the comments. He gripped the rod with both hands, bracing the end against his lower abdomen. His face turned a deep shade of crimson as he let out a roar, using his entire body weight to pull back. He wondered what on earth this thing could be. It was far too heavy, and it didn't feel like a fish struggling at all. It felt more like a water buffalo was pulling from the depths. As he strained, the surface of the water began to churn violently. Massive bubbles rose to the surface, and the viewer count began to skyrocket as people tuned in to watch the intense struggle. The netizens joked that this definitely wasn't a fish, warning him that he might have accidentally hooked the Dragon King himself. One viewer even joked they'd perform a stunt if he managed to pull it in. Mo simply gritted his teeth in silence. The veins on his forehead bulged, but he saw that the red dot on the system map was finally moving toward the shore. Finally, after nearly 10 minutes of deadlock, the surface broke. It wasn't a fish head, nor was it the back of a sea monster. Instead, it was a gray, metallic wing. Yes, a wing. Then, a streamlined shape began to emerge from the depths. A gray object about a meter long floated up, looking like a miniature fighter jet, yet it lacked a cockpit. We see a propulsion propeller at the tail, and Mo was left utterly speechless. In the livestream, the viewers were just as confused as he was. What exactly was this? Well, under the watchful eyes of hundreds of people in the chat, the mystery was about to deepen. Using every ounce of his strength, Mo dragged the heavy object onto the rocks and collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air. This gave him his first real chance to examine the giant. The paint was intact, and despite some tangled weeds, it looked remarkably well preserved. It clearly hadn't been submerged for long. Judging by the impact marks on the wing, it likely crashed into the pond after being damaged. A black engineering box was still attached to the belly of the fuselage, sealed tight with a strip of security tape. The writing on the seal was too blurred to read, but the livestream comments were already exploding, urging him to open the box. Mo swallowed hard. He hesitated for a long time, his mind racing with the possibilities of what could be inside. Ultimately, he forced a smile that looked more like a grimace, realizing the gravity of the situation. He told his brothers in the chat that when it comes to things like this, it's better to trust the authorities. It was only his first day of streaming, and he had no desire to end up behind bars. To be honest, who could blame him? He pulled out his phone and dialed Wang Jiangwo. At the municipal bureau, Jiangwo had just finished his paperwork for the day. The officer was just about to lie down for a nap when his phone rang. He saw the caller ID. It was the corpse finder again. He practically bolted out of bed. After listening to Mo's description, he immediately threw on his clothes and gave a stern command. He told Mo not to touch the box, to turn off the stream, and to wait right there. 40 minutes later, the silence was broken. The piercing sound of sirens shattered the tranquility of the valley as the police vehicles pulled up to the roadside. Jiangwo ran in with several young officers. When they finally reached the rocky shore and saw what was lying there, a gray drone over a meter long, everyone present took a sharp, collective breath of cold air. It was a T-series industrial frame, heavily modified with enlarged batteries and motors for long-distance flight. It was specialized equipment. Jiangwo ordered the scene cordoned off immediately to wait for the forensics team to arrive. Wang Jiangwo was a loyal drone enthusiast, and he recognized the model of this massive machine at a single glance. The technical team stepped forward immediately, cautiously inspecting the black box attached to the frame to ensure there were no explosives. Only after the seal was broken and the lid opened did we see the truth. Mo craned his neck to look, his eyes widening in shock. Officer Lee from the tech department knelt down, picking up a piece and noting that it was worth far more than gold. It was a microchip. These were high-end chips currently under strict market control, and this single box was worth at least $1 million. Wang Jiangwo frowned, suspecting a smuggling operation, as he had recently heard rumors about such activities in the area. It seemed a smuggling ring was using drones to fly illicit goods across the border through these remote mountain ranges. He hadn't expected one to crash into the ghost reservoir, only to be fished out. He turned to give Mo a long, searching look. His gaze was a mix of shock and suspicion, wondering if the young man had some secret informant within the criminal underworld. He asked how Mo always managed to find a major crime scene, but Mo insisted he only wanted to catch a simple fish. He had no idea this junk was in the water. To be honest, he would have much preferred a 100-pound black carp. Wang Jingwo shook his head with a sigh and waved to his men, deciding it was time to wrap things up at the shore. He ordered the evidence to be taken back and told Mo he would need to come along to the station as well. Mo agreed, though he jokingly asked the captain if he could finally sit in the front seat of the police car this time. And so, even though his live stream had been abruptly cut short that evening, the story was far from over. Clips of the old fisherman catching a high-tech drone began to spread across the internet like a wildfire. A day later, Mo had become a local celebrity in Linjiang City, even though the specific details of the case remained classified. A public notice was released praising a citizen Mo for assisting the police in breaking a major smuggling case. Combined with his previous television appearance for the dismemberment case, his follower count exploded by over 50,000 overnight. The comments section was filled with colorful characters, all marveling at the sheer absurdity of his luck. Of course, along with the fame came the rewards, as the case involved a massive sum of money and a vital lead. This time the bonus was even higher, a full 100,000, and we see Mo grinning ear to ear at his bank balance. At that moment, the system notification arrived as expected, and he didn't hesitate to exchange his points for a strengthening agent. Wrestling that drone yesterday had nearly exhausted him. He knew his body was his greatest asset and needed this upgrade. A warm current surged through him, making him feel overflowing with power, even if the process caused some rather embarrassing public flatulence. Fortunately, the results were satisfying. Now that he had money and a stronger body, it was time to enjoy life a little. He remembered the comments from last night's live stream mocking his inability to catch a real fish. So, he decided to go to the market to buy the largest tank and the most expensive fish to wash away the shame. Linjiang City's market wasn't huge, and after a lap, he still hadn't found a tank worthy of his new status. Just as he was about to leave disappointed, the silent system map suddenly flickered, and he instinctively opened the interface. Less than 2 meters to his left, a small light appeared, but this time it wasn't red, it was a golden. The system manual mentioned nothing about golden markers, but he figured it must be a rare treasure. Gold always looks expensive, after all. He stopped and turned toward a small stall selling turtles, which consisted of nothing more than a few worn plastic basins. Turtles of all sizes crawled inside, watched over by an honest-looking old man. Mo's gaze locked onto something nearby. It was a filthy foam box, exactly where the golden marker on his system map was currently hovering. Inside sat a lone, palm-sized turtle covered in dried mud, with 3 distinct black ridges running down its back. Seeing him eyeing the creature, the old man explained he had picked it up in the countryside a few days ago. He called it a closed-shell turtle and offered to let it go for a mere 100 yuan. A golden system marker for only 100 yuan? To be honest, this felt like the bargain of a lifetime. He bought it immediately. He didn't know what made this thing special yet, but the system was never wrong. As he walked, we see Mo start his live stream, eagerly telling his brothers he has something special to show them. He asked if his 100 yuan find was worth it, and thanks to the morning's news, the viewers flocked in immediately. Over 3,000 people flooded the room, joking that they had finally caught the Minister of Justice in action again. The chat was buzzing about his new turtle, until someone pointed out that this creature didn't look like an ordinary pet. One viewer noted that if they weren't mistaken, this was a wild golden coin turtle, judging by the shell's wear. Based on the growth rings, it was at least several decades old, making its value easily reach 6 figures. The realization hit the chat. Wild golden coin turtles are protected species, and Mo was back to his old tricks. From fishing up bodies to buying illegal wildlife, his life was certainly full of excitement, perhaps a bit too much. Watching the screen, Mo's hand trembled so hard he nearly dropped the turtle. That golden system marker was a trap. He realized gold didn't mean treasure, it meant golden handcuffs, so he made a decision that went against his instincts. With practiced ease, he dialed Captain Wang Jingwo, though the phone rang for a long time before being answered. Wang groaned, asking if Mo was his nemesis, as he had only 1 day off a month and wondered what was caught now. Mo explained he hadn't caught an aircraft carrier, but had bought a turtle at the market that might be protected. On the other end of the line, we can practically hear Wang Jingwo taking a very long, deep breath. He told Mo to stay exactly where he was and not to move a single muscle. He ordered him to keep an eye on that stall, while he dispatched nearby officers to the scene immediately. 10 minutes later, Mo found himself back in a police car, a place that was starting to feel like a second home. The poor old vendor was also taken away for questioning, receiving a very sudden lesson on endangered species protection. The priceless golden coin turtle was eventually handed over to experts from the Forestry Bureau for proper care. By the time he finally walked out of the station, the sky was dark, and he found himself waiting once again. By the time he finally left the station, the sky was nearly dark, and he felt far more exhausted than if he had spent the day fishing. He hadn't earned a single cent from that golden light. In fact, he was down 100 yuan, but just as he prepared for bed, the system chimed. To his ears, it sounded like heavenly music. Mo bolted upright in bed as he read the new skill, Fish Affinity. It lowered their alertness, which was essentially a juvenile fish aura for any catch. Finally, he might actually catch a living fish. He looked at his ripple dragon rod in the corner, the fire of ambition reigniting in his eyes. With a skill like this, it would be a tragedy not to go after some giants and give a fishery owner a run for his money. As the first light of dawn crept over the windowsill, he was already up and washing, eager to grab his gear and land something massive. By 8 in the morning, we find him at the northern outskirts of Linjiang City, at the famous Old Wang's Paradise Fishery, once an abandoned kiln pit. The place had been taken over and transformed into a fishing ground by a balding owner named Zhang Dafu. The scene was quite spectacular, with many anglers already lining the banks as Mo walked through the entrance with his gear bag. Zhang Dafu immediately came over to greet him with a loud exclamation. He asked if this wasn't Linjiang's big celebrity, the famous Minister of Justice himself. Blowing a smoke ring, Zhang mockingly asked if he was there on an official inspection or if he had actually come to stock up on fish. With a hint of sarcasm in his eyes, the owner added that he should probably set some expectations first. He joked that his pond only contained fish and certainly didn't have the kind of criminal performance Mo was usually looking for. The regulars nearby burst into laughter, but Mo didn't bother with the banter, simply stating he was a serious angler and asking for the price. Zhang Dafu held up 5 thick, carrot-like fingers to give him the answer. For the trophy pit, mostly big crabs with some grass carp and common carp mixed in, it would be 500 yuan for 4 hours. The buyback rate was 4 yuan per pound, but the initial 500 yuan fee made Mo pause in disbelief. He asked if these fish were being raised on a diet of gold bars, prompting a mocking chuckle from Zhang Dafu. Zhang Dafu pointed toward the pond behind him, telling Mo that if he found it too expensive, he should head to the wild river where it was free. He joked that Mo might even fish up an old teacher there, whereas his own pond had just been stocked with 2,000 pounds of fresh carp. Every single one weighed over a pound, and Zhang claimed that if Mo had the skill to fish the pond dry, he would accept the loss. Mo felt a spark of anger. A typical private pond usually cost 200 or 300, making old Zhang's prices truly extortionate. Determined to teach the man a lesson, he pulled out 5 large bills, deciding that 500 yuan was a price he was willing to pay. He warned Zhang not to cry if he ended up breaking the bank, but Zhang Dafu reacted as if he had just heard the world's funniest joke. Pointing to the other guests, Zhang declared that if Mo could catch 50 pounds today, he wouldn't just refund the 500 yuan. He would eat the entire fish basket right there on the spot. Yes, quite a bold claim indeed. With everyone present as a witness, the surrounding anglers began to clap and cheer, and Mo wasted no more time on words. We see him find a spot to sit down, setting up his equipment, and preparing to start his live stream for the day. He announced to his growing audience that it was time to get to work, skillfully adjusting his float and preparing the bait nest. Though he hadn't caught many fish in recent years, he knew this routine by heart, and today, he had a secret advantage. Catching a fish now felt like a certainty, so he carefully baited his hook with specially prepared bloodworms. Full of confidence, he cast his first line of the day, watching as the float settled steadily in the water with 2 notches showing. He gripped the rod and focused his mind, but as 1 minute turned into 5, and then 30, nothing happened. The float remained as motionless as a needle in a haystack, which, to be honest, started to feel a bit suspicious. Through his system's thermal map, he could clearly see a cluster of white dots in his bait area, yet the fish simply refused to bite. It was truly bizarre, but inside the air-conditioned office, Zhang Dafu watched the surveillance monitor with a cold, mocking smile. He called Mo a fool in his head, knowing full well that he had dumped half a ton of chemical fertilizer into the water yesterday. His goal had been to lower the oxygen levels, ensuring the fish would stay sluggish and uninterested in any bait. As the minutes ticked by, sweat began to bead on Mo's forehead, and he worried he might end up shooting himself in the foot today. Even the mood in his live stream chat was starting to shift, with viewers growing restless at the lack of action. Feeling the pressure, he took a deep breath and silently commanded his system to activate its full capabilities. He triggered the fish affinity skill, urging them to move, and an invisible wave rippled out from him as the center. The wave spread beneath the surface, and a second later, a truly magical scene unfolded on his thermal map. Those lazy white dots began to stir restlessly, scrambling over one another to swarm toward his baiting spot. The once calm water suddenly began to churn as if it were boiling, and Mo's eyes lit up as he gripped his fishing rod. He shouted to his live stream audience to watch closely, telling them that the moment they had been waiting for had arrived. The fish had entered the nest, and the viewers were stunned by the sudden change in the water, wondering what on earth was happening. The water looked like it was exploding, signaling a massive catch, but the situation was developing in a way that even Mo hadn't expected. The fish had certainly arrived, but they didn't seem interested in eating the bait at all. Instead, like fanatical fans meeting an idol, they were desperately rubbing against his float and tangling themselves in his line. Some fish were even jumping straight out of the water, attempting to charge onto the shore in their excitement. A large carp weighing over 2 pounds landed right at his feet, flopping wildly on the muddy ground with its mouth gasping. It looked as if it were professing its love for him, leaving Mo completely stunned while his viewers watched in utter disbelief. The comments exploded, with people asking what kind of dark magic this was, or if he had poured something strange into the water. They wondered how these perfectly normal fish had suddenly gone mad, questioning if this was the legendary gathering of 10,000 fish. Zhang Dafu's expression soured, and he dropped his sunflower seeds in shock. In all his years running this pond, he'd never seen this. He had seen record catches and total failures, but never fish jumping onto the shore of their own accord. To be honest, it was terrifying. Mo wasn't feeling particularly happy either, breaking into a cold sweat as the fish swirled around him without ever biting the hook. He pulled up his line only to find a single scale. Deep down, he was pleading with the fish to actually bite instead of just rubbing against the bait. As we see him struggling to manage this crowd of fanatical aquatic fans, his thermal map suddenly caught a glimpse of something else. Right beneath that dense cluster of white dots, a familiar red light flickered into existence, and around that red point, ripples of light began to radiate outward like sonar waves. Mo's heart skipped a beat. It was another red dot, of course. He knew then that the system would never let him fish in peace, but a sudden realization struck him as he looked at the water. He turned and shouted toward the distance, asking Zhang Dafu if there was something wrong with these fish. He wondered why they wouldn't sink to the bottom, while Zhang Dafu approached from behind, eyeing the chaotic pond with deep suspicion. Hearing the question, the owner stiffened his neck and argued that the heat and low pressure made it normal for fish to float. He told Mo that if his technique was lacking, he shouldn't blame the fish, which prompted a cold smile from our protagonist. Mo glanced back at the red dot glowing at the bottom of the map, and then turned to the camera with a grin for his viewers. He told his audience that since Boss Zhang thought his skills were poor, they were going to try a completely different way of playing. Right in front of everyone, he began changing his gear, swapping to a heavy-duty line nearly as thick as a shoelace. He added a triple-barbed anchor hook. Although his fish affinity skill was failing him, he had never missed a red dot before. Zhang Dafu watched the line change, his eyelids twitching nervously at the sight of the heavy equipment. He asked what Mo was doing with an anchor hook, noting that nobody used such a thing for normal fishing. Mo simply stood up and stretched. His eyes were locked onto that red dot at the bottom of the map as he coolly asked if he had ever said he was going to fish. With a motion like throwing a grenade, he aimed directly for the red dot and hurled the heavy hook into the water with a loud splash. The hook sank straight to the bottom, and instead of pulling back immediately, he used the system map to gently drag it along the floor. He felt the terrain through the rod, and suddenly, he sensed the hook snagging on something hard, a sensation he knew all too well. Without a second's delay, he let out a fierce roar and prepared to pull. That sudden shout startled all the nearby anglers, who turned their heads just in time to see Mo planting his feet firmly in a wide stance. He leaned his body back like a drawn bow, his hands gripping the ripple dragon rod as it bent to its absolute limit before he jerked it upward. If his previous attempts at hooking fish were like playing a delicate violin, this move was more like snapping a heavy industrial cable. The agonizing sound of the line cutting through the water echoed across the entire fishing ground, proving that whatever lay beneath was incredibly heavy. Instead of pulling the object to the surface, the force nearly sent Mo stumbling back. Seeing this, Zhang Dafu quietly let out a sigh of relief. The owner immediately began jumping and shouting with a sense of newfound confidence. He yelled that the hook was snagged on the bottom, telling Mo that he was certain it was stuck on some underwater debris. He warned that if the line snapped from being snagged, it wasn't his problem, which, to be honest, was exactly what he was hoping for. The viewers in the live stream were equally shocked by the scene, and the chat began moving so fast, it was almost impossible to read. They commented that Mo looked like he was in a game of tug-of-war and feared the rod would surely snap under the pressure. But then, we see the tip of the rod begin to twitch. It wasn't a snag after all, but something far more unusual. It wasn't the thrashing of a fish, but a high-frequency, subtle vibration, as if an electric motor were humming deep beneath the surface. Mo's jaw tightened, and the veins on his forehead began to bulge as his body, enhanced by the physical strengthening serum, surged with power. With a final, explosive burst of strength, he roared for it to come up, and a massive plume of murky water began to churn. A dark, massive object tangled in weeds and old fishing nets was forcibly dragged from the depths by our protagonist. It was connected to a long, waterproof cable that stretched all the way across the pond to the manager's office. As it broke the surface, the piercing sound of electrical sizzling and a high-pitched hum suddenly became painfully clear to everyone present. Those standing on the shore felt a sharp pain in their eardrums and a strange sense of irritability. The fish that had been crowding Mo scattered instantly as if they had been struck by a bolt of lightning, fleeing in every direction the moment the object emerged. They crashed frantically into the banks, and some even floated up belly white, causing every angler there to drop their rods in disbelief. As we watch the crowd stare blankly at the mysterious black box, an elderly angler slowly removes his reading glasses in disbelief. He mutters under his breath, asking what on earth this thing is, his voice filled with a growing sense of suspicion. The crowd demands that Boss Zhang explain himself, asking if this was the low air pressure or poor technique he had mentioned earlier. Zhang Dafu's face turns a ghostly white. He instinctively lunges to pull the power cord, but Mo quickly pins it down with his foot. Mo addresses the crowd, calmly explaining that if he isn't mistaken, this device is a high-frequency ultrasonic fish repeller. It is essentially the electronic version of a devastating drift net, and as the realization sinks in, the surrounding anglers explode in fury. One man curses, finally understanding why he never caught anything, realizing it was this man's dirty tricks all along. Another angler notes that once this device is turned on, every fish within 50 meters suffers something akin to a massive concussion. In such a state, the fish wouldn't even think about eating. They are lucky just to stay alive, to be perfectly honest. A dozen enraged veterans, brandishing their heavy net frames and rod stands, surround Zhang Dafu until his legs turn to jelly from fear. He stammers that it's all a misunderstanding, claiming it was just something left over from the past that he accidentally turned on. The crowd isn't buying it, shouting that he's a liar and asking who he thinks he's fooling with such a pathetic excuse. They point out that the wiring is brand new, and just as the tension reaches its breaking point, we hear a sudden development. The sharp wail of a police siren approaches from the distance. It seems someone had the foresight to call the authorities after all. A familiar pair of sturdy legs steps out of the car as Wang Zhengwo appears in plain clothes, clutching a bag of fresh buns. It seems he was called in before he could even finish his breakfast, and his gaze sweeps the crowd before landing squarely on Mo. The officer takes a deep breath and rubs his temples in a long, heavy silence that speaks volumes about his current mood. He asks Mo if he somehow planted a GPS tracker on him to find him whenever he's off duty, which is a fair question. He complains that he just wanted to enjoy a quiet breakfast, yet Mo has managed to stir up this massive commotion already. Mo points to the fish repeller on the ground with a look of pure innocence, insisting to Captain Wang that his intentions were honorable. Mo reminds the officer that, as we know, he hasn't managed to catch a single fish in several days. He had come to this pond specifically to fish today, yet somehow, he ended up catching this strange device instead. He suggests that the owner is essentially a fraud, and at 500 per person, the total amount is certainly no small matter. Mo claims he's just doing a public service, while Wang Jingwo looks at the still buzzing cheating device with a mix of irritation and amusement. Although this type of case isn't usually handled by his unit, since they've stumbled upon a potential mass fraud, they can't simply ignore it. Wang Jingwo waves his hand, and his team immediately steps forward to take Zhang Dafu into custody, which is a satisfying sight. The livestream chat erupts in celebration, with the screen filling with praise for the great official and his swift justice. After clearing the scene, Wang Jingwo claps Mo on the shoulder, calling him his little brother with a wry smile. He remarks that in just 2 days, Mo's business scope seems to have expanded from catching violent criminals to uncovering economic crimes, while Mo looks down at his empty fish basket with a rather bitter smile. Mo tells the captain he's being too kind, admitting that, to be honest, he would have much preferred catching an actual fish. He laments being empty-handed again, but Wang glances at the basket and points to a fish still flopping on the shore. The officer points out there's a perfectly good fish right there, but Mo simply kicks it back into the water and shakes his head. In the mind of a true fisherman, picking a fish up off the ground simply doesn't count as catching it. He vows that next time, definitely next time, he will catch a real fish with his own rod, as a matter of principle. As Wang Jingwo drives away with sirens wailing, a new notification suddenly flashes across Mo's system interface. It occurs to him that this business might actually be more profitable than actual fishing, a thought he quickly tries to shake off. He dismisses the dangerous idea, reminding himself that he is a fisherman, not a bounty hunter, and he mustn't lose his way. Seeing that it's still early, he picks up his empty basket to find a new spot, completely unaware of what is happening elsewhere. Because of a viral photo, Mo has already become a living legend within the fishing circles of Linjiang City. In the photo, we see him holding his signature ripple dragon rod, standing over his gear with the seized fish pond in the background. With police lights flashing behind him, the caption was only 1 line long, yet every single word hit like a ton of bricks. By 1 in the afternoon, Mo had packed his gear and arrived at the entrance of the Happy Angler Club in the east of the city. Since old Zhang's place was a fraud, he decided to try a legitimate one, run by an owner rumored to be an honest man. It had a great reputation in the fishing community, but it was quite far from his home, making this his very first visit. He was just about to ask about the fees when the old gatekeeper's eyes widened, looking as if he'd just seen a ghost. Without a word, the old man turned around and bolted back into the park as fast as his legs could carry him. He shouted for the boss to run, screaming that the man who sends people to prison had finally arrived at their gates. Mo watched the old man flee with a head full of questions, but within 30 seconds, the owner rushed out clutching 2 cartons of premium cigarettes. Before Mo could even speak, the owner shoved them into his arms, looking absolutely desperate to get rid of him. The owner begged him to just go somewhere else, calling him a master and explaining that his was only a small business. He pleaded for Mo to show some mercy, insisting that these 2 cartons of cigarettes were a gift if he would only leave. The owner begged him to go play somewhere else, but he just insisted that he was there for the fishing, and nothing else. The owner, calling him Master Shun, admitted it wasn't that he wouldn't let him fish, but that he was truly terrified of what might happen. He feared that if Mo cast his line, he might accidentally hook the skeletal remains of his great-grandfather, which he simply couldn't handle. The owner handed over his phone with a bitter smile, and 10 minutes later, we find our protagonist in a rather strange position. He stood by the roadside clutching his 2 cartons of cigarettes, feeling utterly bewildered by how his simple hobby had gone so wrong. He wondered how he'd become an enemy of the entire industry, unable to enter a pond, and seemingly cursed by the heavens to never catch a fish. Just then, the phone in his pocket vibrated, and he pulled it out to find a voice message from his old fishing buddy, Chun. Chun laughed as he told him the news. Apparently, Mo had been officially blacklisted by every single fishing pond in Linjiang City. Mo rolled his eyes and typed a sharp "get lost" to Chun, who quickly sent another voice message telling him not to be discouraged. Chun suggested that if he couldn't go to the ponds, he should try the reservoirs, like the Dragon King Reservoir in the neighboring county. There were places like the Blackwater Pool, a bit far, yes, but the fish were huge, wild, and nobody would care who he was. Hearing this, Mo's eyes lit up. In a reservoir that vast, there would be no owners to stop him from fishing however he pleased. However, he soon realized a new problem. The distance was too great to keep lugging all his heavy gear back and forth in taxis. He glanced at the balance on his phone, and a wild idea began to take root in his mind. He needed a car, and he needed one now. Not just any car, mind you, but a dedicated angler's vehicle that could handle heavy loads and off-road terrain. With newfound determination, he decided to forget the commercial ponds. He was going to conquer the great reservoirs and start his expedition. Moving with purpose, he arrived at a dealership, spent 10 minutes picking out a rugged off-road vehicle, and immediately hit the gas. He sped out of the dealership, leaving nothing behind but a cloud of exhaust and a group of stunned, open-mouthed salespeople. And right at that moment, we hear that familiar ding sound echoing in his mind once again. The system detected that our host now possessed a motorized vehicle, and as a result, the fishing heat map was being upgraded. The expedition mode map was now fully unlocked, expanding the current scanning radius to a staggering 100 kilometers. As he watched the virtual map expand countless times over before his eyes, he felt a sudden surge of grand ambition. To be honest, he felt as if every reservoir in the entire city of Linjiang was now part of his personal kingdom. However, it was currently rush hour, and the expressway leading out of Linjiang was heavily congested when a sudden sound erupted from the right. It was the deafening roar of a powerful engine, and he turned to see a heavily modified Raptor F-150 idling beside him. The truck towered over his own, pulling a small lure boat on a trailer, a setup that easily cost over $100,000. The Raptor's window rolled down to reveal a red-haired youth in sunglasses, resting one hand casually outside the door. On his wrist sat a luxury Richard Mille watch. Just as Mo was sizing him up, the red-haired youth noticed him and took off his glasses. With a look of utter disbelief, the youth shouted, "Wait, what the? You're the Minister of Justice." He asked if he was the Mo who fished up corpses. Mo, feeling a headache coming on, rolled down his window and replied crossly, "I am Mo, but I am a fisherman," he insisted, though the red-haired youth, Zhao, only laughed harder at that. Zhao pointed at the gear in the back seat and teased that he'd watched both of Mo's live streams without seeing a single fish. He mockingly asked if Mo was heading out to deliver more goods to the police, making Mo want to just drive away immediately. Zhao introduced himself as being from the Lure Club, claiming everyone knew him, and then issued a sudden challenge to our minister. He wanted to see who was better. Hearing the name, Mo realized this guy was actually quite famous in the local fishing circles. He was a rich kid with family money, the type who had every top-tier gadget imaginable, but rarely caught an actual fish. Mo tried to decline without a second thought, but Zhao wasn't about to let him get away that easily. Zhao explained he was heading to the Dragon King Reservoir, where he heard some massive predatory carp were biting. He proposed they go together, offering a high-stakes bet. If Mo won, he'd give him a brand-new gear set from his truck. It was a Shimano lure set worth over $30,000. Suddenly, Mo's hand stopped halfway through closing the window. His current rod was decent, but he had always wanted to try high-end lure fishing. He just couldn't justify the cost of the gear. Mo looked at Zhao and asked for the specific rules. Zhao kept it simple. Whoever caught the heaviest single fish would win. If Mo lost, he simply had to shout 3 times on his live stream that lure fishing was king and traditional fishing was for seniors. Mo rubbed his nose, thinking the rich kid's terms were quite insulting, but then he took a quick glance at his system map. 50 kilometers away at the center of the reservoir, a massive light was flashing, not red or white, but a blinding, pure gold. The golden was moving fast. Mo's lips curled into a friendly smile as he realized the prize was already within reach. "Fine, I'll take that bet," he said. "Just don't go crying to your mother when you lose. See you at the reservoir." An hour later, we finally arrive at the Dragon King Reservoir, one of the largest water sources in the region with a vast, shimmering surface. The fading light of the sunset scatters across the water like a painting, though Mo is in no mood to admire the scenery. That's because Zhao is currently standing on his incredibly expensive-looking inflatable lure boat, showing off like a man possessed. He boasts about his bait-casting reel, his long-distance casting technique, and his high-tech carbon fiber fish finder. He claims technology changes lives, while Mo simply stands on the muddy bank and quietly pulls out his own Ripple Dragon rod. Both of their live streams are active, and with Zhao being a popular streamer himself, the hype surrounding this duel has absolutely exploded. The viewers are torn between the rich kid and the Minister of Justice, with many doubting who will actually come out on top. Some believe our minister has supernatural luck on his side, even betting snacks that he'll find a way to win. Others joke that he'll probably just fish up a water ghost. Soon, the competition officially begins, and money clearly has its perks. Though Zhao's technique is mediocre, his position in the deep water structure is perfect, and in under 10 minutes, he hooks a small perch. As he pulls it from the water, he laughs triumphantly, asking Master Mo how things are going on his end. He mocks Mo for playing in the mud, but Mo remains completely unfazed by the taunts directed at the camera. He is focused entirely on the system interface, watching that golden dot swimming rapidly in the center of the reservoir. Once he confirms it's a living creature, he activates his beginner fish affinity skill, sending an invisible wave through the water. However, this time it doesn't trigger a massive swarm of fish like it did back at the private fishing pond. Seeing Zhao land yet another fish, Mo decides to go all in, spending 100 points in the system shop. He exchanges them for god-tier bait and uses all his strength to hurl spoonful after spoonful into the deep water. Zhao watches this and shakes his head, thinking Mo is being foolish for trying to bait an area so far from his rod. He assumes Mo is just feeding the fish for free, but Mo ignores him and waits. 5 minutes later, the golden dot suddenly stops. Then, it abruptly shifts direction, charging toward Mo's position so fast, it leaves a golden afterimage on the map. Mo's heart begins to race with excitement, knowing that a golden dot of this size represents a truly rare and magnificent treasure. The moment his line hits the water, the float vanishes with terrifying speed, sinking deep into the depths in a mere second. Even his Ripple Dragon rod is jerked downward violently, the tip plunging straight into the water as a force 10 times stronger than the drone incident travels up the rod. Mo lets out a roar, shouting for the creature to rise as he heaves upward with both hands. A sharp crack echoes as the specialized heavy-duty line screams under the strain, and the water's surface suddenly explodes. A massive, shimmering golden tail slaps the water, sending spray everywhere in the sunset. Zhao is so stunned, he actually drops his own rod. Pointing at the churning water, Zhao stammers in disbelief, wondering aloud if he's just seen a literal golden dragon. Under the fading light, that giant golden tail seems bathed in a holy glow before it strikes the surface and dives back down. The resulting wave nearly capsizes Zhao's small boat, while Mo clings to his rod, feeling the terrifying power surging from below. His expression is one of more pain than joy, but looking at that blindingly bright golden, his determination reaches its limit. Whether it's a dragon or a worm, he tells himself that since it took his bait, it belongs to him now. With a final push, man and rod begin an epic battle against the depths on the banks of the Dragon King Reservoir. The livestream chat is absolutely exploding, with everyone standing up to witness what they believe is a miracle in the making. Fans cheer for the minister, wanting him to show the rich kid the true power of a miracle, but Mo has no time for comments. His arms feel as heavy as lead, aching and sore, yet his inner wild joy erupts like a volcanic explosion. It's alive, it is definitely alive. Through the rod, he can clearly feel the desperate, powerful struggle of the creature beneath the waves. As he struggles to use his technique to neutralize the underwater momentum, he can't help but burst into a triumphant laugh. He shouts to Zhao that he's finished, estimating that this catch must weigh at least 50 pounds. He mocks Zhao's small fish as mere snacks compared to this, though a pale Zhao snaps back that the line might still break. Zhao warns him that anything is possible until the fish is on land, desperately hoping for a stroke of bad luck. But in Mo's dictionary, the concept of a broken line simply doesn't exist. He ignores the spite and glares at the system map. As that golden dot on the map draws closer, Mo's eyes light up, recognizing the signs of a legendary living creature. He is certain this must be a rare, top-tier catch, the kind that could finally wash away his reputation as a perpetual loser. Everything rests on this single moment. Time ticks by, and the stalemate continues for over half an hour. Finally, we see the underwater giant begin to tire, its desperate struggles growing weaker as its stamina fades. Seizing the moment, Mo leans back with a roar, pulling with all his might until the water's surface violently explodes. A massive dark shadow is forced out of the depths, and the first thing we notice is a thick, flat tail. Then comes a wide, flattened body that, at first glance, looks like a piece of driftwood or a giant catfish. Zhao lets out a startled cry, swearing in disbelief at the sheer size of what he thinks is a catfish. He wonders if its head is as big as a wash basin, but a second later, Zhao and the entire livestream are stunned into silence. As the creature is dragged onto the shallows, it doesn't flop on its side like a fish. Instead, it extends four thick, stubby legs. It begins to crawl clumsily across the bank. Yes, actually crawl, before opening an impossibly wide, gaping mouth. It lets out a bone-chilling wail that sounds exactly like a crying infant, leaving Mo frozen in place, as if paralyzed. He stares at the dark, slimy creature with four legs, listening to it cry out into the evening air. The joy on his face slowly shatters, replaced by a look of pure, silent despair. To be honest, he looks like he wants to cry too. Back on the boat, Zhao is so terrified he nearly falls into the water, pointing a trembling finger at the thing on the shore. He stammers, asking Mo if his luck has gone too far this time, demanding to know what on earth that thing is. He wonders if it's a water ghost or some spirit taking form. In the live stream, the chat goes silent for a moment before erupting. The viewers are losing their minds, swearing and questioning what this monster could be, with some suggesting it's a giant loach. But others quickly realize the truth. It's a giant salamander, a baby fish, and a wild one at that. At over 50 pounds, its cries are enough to terrify anyone, and poor Mo looks like he's about to have a complete breakdown. As he watches the massive creature blinking its innocent little eyes and wailing in the mud, 1,000 chaotic thoughts race through Mo's mind. He tells himself all he wanted was to catch a simple fish, yet somehow, he's managed to pull up this ancient ancestor instead. The giant salamander on the ground seems to sense his rejection, crying even louder with a shrill, aggrieved sound that makes Mo jump in fright. He immediately tosses his fishing rod aside and raises both hands over his head, pleading with his viewers that he is innocent. He swears he was only looking for a large coulter fish, and that this creature practically insisted on hooking itself. It's as if the fish is trying to frame him, he thinks, while Zhao paddles the boat to the shore but refuses to actually step off. Keeping a respectful distance from the massive salamander, Zhao looks on with eyes full of awe and addresses his friend. He admits defeat, noting that in all his years of lure fishing, he's seen people catch snakes, trash, and even birds. He's even seen people pull up turtles, but using a hand rod to land a 50-pound giant salamander is something else entirely. Zhao declares Mo is the first person in history to pull this off, but Mo is far too panicked to appreciate the compliment. He begs Zhao to stop talking and help him figure out what to do, because he has no desire to end up behind bars. His mind is filled with images of Officer Wang Jiangwo inviting him back to the station for tea. This isn't a prize, it's a liability. It feels less like a catch and more like a life sentence, so he rubs his temples and squats a safe 2 meters away from the beast. He looks humble, almost like a servant tending to a temperamental royal, wanting to unhook it but far too terrified to touch it. The creature lets out 2 more wails that make his skin crawl, and he silently begs the ancestor to stop its crying. He mutters that if it keeps crying, it'll attract wolves, or worse, it'll attract the police, though he stops mid-sentence as a realization hits. Looking back at the phone still broadcasting the live stream, he resigns himself to fate and dials the emergency line to ask for help. He asks to be transferred to the Forestry Bureau or Animal Protection, explaining that he has caught another protected species. The operator on the other end pauses for a long moment before hesitantly asking if he is a certain gentleman they know. They ask if he's the Minister of Justice, who keeps catching criminals and rare beasts, leaving Mo to rub his forehead in pure exhaustion. Mo sighs and confirms his identity, explaining that he is currently at the Dragon King Reservoir, where he has just landed a wild giant salamander weighing nearly 50 pounds. He adds that it's alive and currently wailing, urging them to hurry before it suffers from dehydration, and then he finally hangs up the phone. We see him looking completely drained, only to notice Zhao Duyu standing nearby with a water bottle, casually splashing water over the creature's skin. As he pours, Zhao clicks his tongue in amazement, wondering aloud how on earth a creature like this managed to grow so incredibly large. He jokes that 1 pot wouldn't be enough to stew it, and they'd need 2, prompting a panicked Mo to rush over and cover Zhao's mouth. Mo warns him that if he wants to go to prison, he shouldn't drag others down with him, noting that every pound of this meat represents a prison sentence. 1 pot of this, he remarks, would earn them a lifetime of prison meals, while the viewers in the live stream, who love a good disaster, are absolutely losing it. The fans joke that Zhao is a true outlaw, suggesting that if he actually made that soup, his next bed would likely be made of iron bars. They predict Officer Wang will arrive in 5 seconds, and as if on cue, Mo's phone begins to ring once again. The caller ID shows Wang Jiangwo, and with a trembling hand, Mo answers only to hear the officer's voice sounding particularly sharp and weary. Wang greets him by name, mentioning that he was just in the middle of working overtime and eating instant noodles when the call came in. He says the command center told him Mo was causing trouble again, joking about how he hadn't managed to hook any old teachers this time around. Mo looks like he's on the verge of tears, trying his best to explain the absurdity of the situation to the skeptical officer. He simply nods and ends the call, and 40 minutes later, several pickup trucks marked with forest security insignias appear in the distance. As they bounce along the rugged mountain road, their headlights pierce the darkness and illuminate Mo's face, which is a mask of pure exhaustion. Wang Jingwo has indeed come along, and the first thing he does after stepping out of the truck is walk over and pat Mo on the shoulder. He can't help but let out a sudden burst of laughter, and seeing Mo's resentful expression, he quickly offers a half-hearted apology. He admits the scene is just too perfect, wondering how out of all the anglers out there, Mo was the only one to hook such a creature. Several experts in white coats quickly surround the area, gently moving the giant salamander into a professional-grade water tank. The lead expert, Old Lu, is so excited that his beard is practically trembling as he declares the creature to be an absolute masterpiece of nature. Old Lu declares with absolute certainty that this is the largest wild giant salamander ever discovered in our Linjiang city. Judging by its size, he estimates it must be at least 50 or 60 years old, a true little longevity star of the water. After saying this, he turns and tightly grips Mo's hand, his eyes brimming with genuine gratitude. He tells the young man that he cannot thank him enough for what he has done today. This creature, he explains, holds immeasurable value for their research into the local aquatic ecosystem. Mo has performed a great service, though he can only manage a strained smile before hesitantly asking a question. He worries that the hook scratched the creature's mouth and wonders if it can ever return to the Dragon King reservoir. The expert reassures him that the hook missed anything vital. After some disinfection and a few days of rest, they will bring it right back home. Hearing this, Mo finally relaxes as Old Lu signals to his team. His assistant understands immediately, returning to the truck to retrieve a prepared silk banner and a red envelope. Old Lu hands them over, explaining that this is a small token of appreciation from the Forestry Bureau. It includes a 2,000 yuan cash prize, not a fortune, perhaps, but a sincere mark of their respect. He hopes Mr. Mo will continue this noble spirit, and as Mo looks at the gold lettering on the banner, which names him a guardian of fish and ecology, he feels a wave of dizzying irony while the experts depart. The divine beast that had been wailing for hours is finally driven away, though it seems to give Mo one last look. He can't tell if it's thanking him for its life or mocking his luck, but at last, the scene falls silent. Zhao Duyu then opens the trunk of his raptor and pulls out a sleek, professional-grade alloy case. A bet is a bet, he says, presenting the latest Shimano spinning reel and a high-end lure rod. The set is worth 38,000 yuan, and though Mo's hands itch to take it, he hesitates at the price tag. He asks if it's too much, but Zhao insists he take it, clearly hoping to stay on the good side of such a lucky angler. Zhao laughs, telling Mo he only asks for one thing. If he ever hooks a dragon or a phoenix next time, he just wants a chance to touch it. Mo looks down at the heavy, top-tier lure equipment in his hands, then at his empty fish basket, and can only let out a long, weary sigh toward the sky. He tells himself he only wanted a simple bowl of fish soup. Why must it be so difficult? On the way back home, his mood is a strange mix of pain and joy. It was a heart-pounding day, yet he walked away with 2,000 yuan in cash. Add to that a 30,000 yuan gear set, and Zhao Duyu calling him master at every turn while dragging him into an elite local angling group. Zhao insists he join to open the eyes of those frogs in a well, but the pain remains. Mo is still technically empty-handed. He mutters bitterly while driving, cursing the system and refusing to believe his luck can stay this cursed forever. Next time, he vows to find a place so desolate even ghosts won't visit, just to see what nonsense the system tries to pull then. It is well past midnight by the time he returns. After washing up, he collapses on the sofa and summons the system. Catching that giant salamander earned him 1,000 points, bringing his total to 3,500. He opens the exchange shop, hoping to find something to break his no-fish curse when he notices a new icon shimmering in the daily specials section. It is a trial version of the Ultimate Inside Eye, priced at 500 points per use. Once activated, it allows the host to see everything clearly up to 10 meters underwater for 10 full minutes. Mo reads the description and bolts upright on the sofa. To be honest, this is nothing short of a literal cheat code. In the past, his fishing was nothing but a guessing game. Now, the game has changed. Without a moment's hesitation, he spends the points for the trial. Next time, he plans to head to the famous Thousand Island Lake, a place where they say the fish are so thick you could walk across their backs. He refuses to believe that if he watches a fish swallow the hook, he'll somehow end up pulling out another ancient relic. He is lost in these pleasant thoughts when a news notification pops up on his phone. The headline catches his eye: Linjiang Flash News. Recent heavy rains have caused upstream water levels to rise sharply. Fishermen in the downstream waters of Duanhong Bay have discovered a large amount of mysterious floating debris, a place rumored to be a century-old site. The news reports it as the site where a merchant ship carrying silver bullion sank, and treasure hunters are already flocking to the area. Intrigued by the sunken silver of Duanhong Bay, Mo quickly opens the System Maps Expedition mode to investigate the location. He sees a light on the river path glowing a deep, purplish red, flickering with a faint black aura, and right beside that light, there are several golden spots densely packed together, red points paired with gold points, a truly striking visual. He wonders what this could mean. Could it be that great danger is accompanied by even greater opportunity? Perhaps an ancient teacher is guarding treasures at the bottom. He gulps, feeling tempted, though his reason warns him against it. Deep down, he knows that going there likely means another meeting with Captain Wong. After hesitating, he rubs his chin and mutters to himself. He decides to give it one more try. After all, with the ultimate inside eye, he can simply peek underwater first. If it's just another body, he'll run. If it's something good, he'll fish. The next day, he sleeps until noon before driving out again. After driving for over an hour, he arrives at Duanhong Bay, a place where the river channel forms a massive, sharp U-shaped bend. The current is rapid and full of hidden reefs. Because of the complex terrain, debris from upstream often gets stranded right here. Since ancient times, it has been a prime spot for those seeking alternative fortunes. Already, many cars are parked along the riverbank. Dozens of people are wielding detectors of all sizes, scanning the muddy flats for treasure like they are sweeping for mines. Mo finds high ground to park, grabs his gear, and skillfully starts his live stream. Immediately, the viewer count begins to climb. The comments flood in, with one fan jokingly greeting the minister, while others recognize the famous Duanhong Bay. Some claim the place has more water ghosts than fish, while others have heard rumors of people actually fishing up silver ingots. One message stands out. "Master, you're at Duanhong Bay too? I'm on my way, save a spot for me." That last comment came from none other than Zhao Duoyu. Mo simply offers a casual reply as he continues walking forward. Carrying his gear, he avoids the crowd of treasure hunters and heads alone to a deep backwater where the current is strongest. This is the exact spot on the system map where the purple, red, and golden lights overlap. He takes his stand upon the coastal rocks. He glances down at the murky, yellowish water of the river, and under his breath, he activates the ultimate inside eye. A refreshing coolness washes over his eyes, and the world before him shifts as the muddy water begins to transform. In his vision, the river becomes crystal clear, as if switching to a 4K ultra-high-definition feed that pierces straight to the bottom. He can't help but let out a startled exclamation. The riverbed looks like a massive junkyard filled with rusted frames and old bicycles. We even see the skeletal remains of half a tractor resting down there. But his gaze is quickly drawn to a depression in the deepest part of the bay, hidden beneath the piles of industrial waste. There, scattered about, are several coin-sized circular objects emitting a faint, crystalline glow. Before he can even celebrate, he notices a massive, oval-shaped object over a meter-long lying beneath the silver coins. It sits half-buried in the silt, wrapped in a thick, broken iron chain where the brightest silver pieces are snagged. On the system's thermal map, this giant oval object is pulsing with a heart-pounding, purplish-red light. Checking the timer, he realizes he has barely 5 minutes left before his special vision expires. He must deliver the hook precisely to that massive object or snag the chain. Quickly, he switches to his gear. He grabs the oversized feather hook that made him famous, adds a lead weight, and takes careful aim for the cast. The weight traces a graceful arc through the air, landing perfectly above the target and sinking slowly into the depths. Holding his breath, he maneuvers the rod until the hook brushes against the chain holding the silver ingots. Suddenly, a chime rings in his head, and the underwater world instantly returns to its natural, murky state. A wave of dizziness hits him, but he ignores it, snapping his wrist back as a heavy sensation travels up the line. It's the unmistakable feedback of metal biting into metal, and feeling triumphant, he grips the rod with both hands to pull. However, the object beneath doesn't budge an inch. It feels as if he's hooked the earth itself. It is, quite frankly, incredibly heavy. He ponders the situation until a new idea strikes him. If he can't pull it up, it's time to bring out the heavy weaponry. Before long, everyone witnesses a rather unique tug-of-war match unfolding right there on the banks of Broken Red Bay. On one side, we have his brand-new off-road vehicle, and on the other, an unknown giant lurking deep beneath the white water. He pulls the electric winch cable and a nylon rope from the car, sliding a slipknot down along the tensioned fishing line. Relying on his memory from the inside eye and the tactile feedback in his hands, he manages to loop it around an iron ring on the massive object. This maneuver leaves the viewers in the live stream completely stunned, wondering if he is inventing an entirely new way to fish. After all, what kind of fish requires a winch? There is a growing sense that whatever happens today will be anything but small. Ignoring the flood of comments, he stands on the shore with the winch remote in hand and finally presses the button. The winch motor emits a strained hum as the steel cable snaps taut, causing the front of the off-road vehicle to dip slightly under the pressure. Nearby treasure hunters are drawn in by the commotion, gathering around to watch the spectacle and offer their own theories. Some suggest he's hooked a shipwreck, while others are certain it's just sunken wood, which is common in these parts. One person even jokes about pulling up a coffin, as more onlookers pull out their phones to record the scene. The water's surface begins to churn violently, bringing up black mud and bubbles along with a heavy, stagnant stench of decay. Amidst the high expectations and a sudden splash of water, the underwater giant finally reveals its true form, starting with a section of chain. It is a thick, rusted iron chain, and clinging to it are several dark, rounded lumps that emit a faint, shimmering glow. His eyes light up the moment he sees them. It's silver, genuine silver, just as he had suspected. Next, the massive object entangled in the chains is dragged onto the shallows by the winch, a giant, oval-shaped hunk of iron. Covered in rust, it looks neither like a coffin nor a treasure chest, but it features a protruding metal ring at the very top. His hook and the tow rope are perfectly snagged on that metal ring. He stops the winch and rushes over to inspect it closely. There is something strangely familiar about it, resembling perhaps a giant capsule or something far more industrial. To be honest, it looks quite a bit like a massive gas tank, and the braver members of the crowd lean in to inspect the thick iron plating. It looks like a part from some kind of machine. Someone shouts, "Look, there's writing on it. It says Yongwei." In the live stream, the flood of celebratory comments suddenly vanishes, leaving a vacuum of silence for a single, chilling moment. Then, a bold red comment with exclamation marks streaks across the screen like a thunderclap. "Host, run. Get out of there now. Don't touch that ring. Whatever you do, don't touch it." A viewer named Old Wong is spamming the warning, leaving Rimal wondering if this is real. Another message flashes by. "That's a World War II aerial high-explosive bomb. Look at the shape. It's an aviation bomb. Or maybe a magnetic naval mine. That ring you're hooked onto is the trigger mechanism. Stop looking and run. If this thing goes off, you're headed straight to heaven." Rima turns his head stiffly toward the iron mass less than 2 meters away. Suddenly, he hears a faint but incredibly crisp click sound. A wave of icy dread surges from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. He freezes instantly. The people who had been crowding around the iron object also realize, a second too late, that something is very wrong. Is that thing making a noise?" Someone whispers. To be honest, it was the last question they should have stayed to ask. The crowd freezes for a heartbeat before scattering like a disturbed nest of hornets. In the blink of an eye, the shore is deserted. Everyone has fled, and Rinmal wants to run too, but he can't. His rod is connected to the line to the car, and the car to the rope. The rope is pulled tight against that trigger ring, and the winch is locked solid. If he tries to release the tension now, he's certain he'll be taking a one-way flight to the clouds. His legs shake uncontrollably as he forces himself to stay calm. With trembling fingers, he dials Wang Jiangwo. The call connects quickly, and Jiangwo's voice sounds utterly exhausted. "Ramal, what is it now? I'm in a seminar about your unique situation. Tell me you haven't caused more trouble." Staring at the massive iron sphere, Ramal speaks with a trembling voice. "Captain Wang, there are no dead bodies this time. But I might be about to send a whole group of living people to the other side. I used my winch to pull up a bomb at Broken Soul Bay. The viewers say it's an aviation bomb, and I'm standing right on top of it." Silence follows, until 3 seconds later, the sound of a chair crashing over echoes through the phone. And then, we hear Wang Jiangwo's voice erupting in a desperate, lung-tearing roar, ordering everyone to stop the meeting and dispatch the bomb squad and helicopters immediately. "Rima, stay exactly where you are and don't move a muscle. Keep your breathing light. That is a 2,000-pound aerial bomb. If that thing goes off, the entire bay is gone." "I know, Captain Wang," Rinmo replies. "Right now, I'm afraid to even let out a sigh, let alone move." 10 minutes later, just as he feels he is about to collapse from the sheer tension, the roar of rotors finally echoes through the sky. A helicopter sweeps in, circling over the bay as the massive downdraft sends the surrounding reeds whipping wildly in every direction. Panic surges through him again as he shouts blindly, "Don't come any closer. The wind is too strong. It's going to move the car." Realizing the danger, the pilot quickly pulls up and lands on a distant road. Soon, Wang Jingwo arrives with a large team of officers. They immediately establish a 2-kilometer exclusion zone, and even the curious onlookers watching from a distance are evacuated to the opposite mountain. Several experts in heavy, bulky bomb suits carry their toolkits toward him, moving with the awkward but purposeful gait of penguins. Standing 100 meters back, Wang Jingwo shouts through a megaphone, "Listen to the experts. Do exactly what they say and do not move." Ramal wants to nod, but his neck feels as though it's been set in concrete, so he simply blinks his eyes, hoping the captain can see him. The lead disposal expert, an older man, scans the object with his instruments. His expression darkens as he speaks into his radio. "This is a foreign-made M666, he reports. "It was designed specifically to sink warships. The explosive payload inside wouldn't just vaporize this car, it could level half of this hillside." He glances at the trigger ring held tight by the nylon rope and wipes sweat from his brow. This young man is incredibly lucky. The firing pin is rusted, and right now, it's held in a state of incredibly delicate, almost impossible balance. It's a good thing he didn't try to run, or the vibration might have tripped the pin. Hearing this, Ramal feels his mind go blank. "Master, can you disarm it?" he whispers. The expert shoots him a sharp glare. "Don't speak. Even the sound waves from your voice could cause a vibration." His plea for help dies in his throat, which seems a bit unfair, considering how much the expert is talking. What follows is a half hour that feels infinitely longer than the 10 minutes he spent waiting for the helicopter to arrive. We watch as 2 disposal experts proceed with extreme caution, using liquid nitrogen spray to freeze the firing mechanism before reaching for their precision tools. Bit by bit, they begin to cut away the tangled nylon rope and Rinma's fishing hook, while the senior expert can't help but grumble as he works. He mutters that he's spent his entire life disarming explosives on construction sites and even in subway tunnels. But having to deal with a bomb that someone actually caught with a fishing rod, well, that is a first for him. Renma is nearly moved to tears, silently pleading for the master to just focus, when suddenly, a sharp click echoes through the air. The tension in the nylon rope finally snaps as it's cut, and the second expert quickly snaps a stabilizer onto the firing pin. The man lets out a long, heavy sigh and slumps to the ground, announcing that they are, for the moment, safe. Renma feels the strength drain from his body as he collapses, gasping for air, until the old expert walks over and claps him on the shoulder. The man tells him quite bluntly that he should consider his life a gift he managed to reclaim today. At that moment, Wang Jiangwo rushes over, his finger trembling with pure frustration as he points it directly at the young man. He asks Renma if he's trying to give him a heart attack with these daily life-threatening antics, but Renma insists he's been wronged. He explains that he was only trying to fish for some silver coins, but then a sudden thought strikes him and he turns his head. He looks toward the massive bomb now surrounded by special police, or more accurately, he looks at the iron chain wrapped around it. He weakly asks Captain Wang if the silver attached to that chain still counts as his catch, causing the air to freeze for a heartbeat. Wang Jiangwo is so exasperated, he actually laughs, marveling that the boy is still thinking about silver after nearly losing his life. He remarks that with such a reckless obsession with money, Renma is practically wasting his talent by not being an undercover agent. The captain bends down to pick up the chain, weighing the dark metal pieces in his hand before declaring them cultural relics that must be confiscated. Renma lets out a mournful wail, realizing all his terrifying hard work was for nothing as Wang Jiangwo hands the chain to the administrative department. The captain pats his shoulder to comfort him, telling him to stop crying because even without the silver, he's performed a great service. The bomb was hidden and highly unstable. If he hadn't pulled it up, a future flood might have sent it downstream with catastrophic results. If it had struck a downstream bridge or a power station, the consequences would have been unthinkable, but now he qualifies for both a bomb disposal and a cultural relic reward. Wang Jiangwo explains that after coordinating with the Cultural Relics Bureau, they've decided to apply for an 80,000 yuan reward, holding up 8 fingers to emphasize the point. Renma's eyes, which had been dull with disappointment, suddenly light up like searchlights, and he feels as though all his physical exhaustion has vanished instantly. He even feels a sudden, reckless urge to go back and take a commemorative photo with the bomb, while Wang Jiangwo simply shakes his head with a helpless smile. The captain asks him, quite seriously, if he could please report what he intends to catch beforehand next time. He admits his heart can't take much more of this, prompting Renma to nod vigorously and pat his chest as he makes a solemn, heartfelt promise. He looks the captain in the eye and insists that next time, yes, definitely next time, he will actually catch a fish.